Nexus smartphones are supposed to be above everything else. Google created the first one to introduce a phone so ahead of the curve that Android manufacturers had to up their game. But with the Nexus 5, the phone feels more like it's heading in the same direction rather than laying a new path for others to follow. There's nothing genre-leading about it except for its software, but we'll get to that later. For now, let's focus on the body that's reminiscent of the LG G2 and the Google Nexus 7. The Nexus 5 takes the basic outline of the G2 and a lot of its internal features and applies a matte plastic frame like the Nexus 7, and then calls it a day. The design is purposely boring and void of any distinguishing feature. Now that's perfectly fine though. It's simple, and it's as simple as sometimes good. What's more important is that most of the core specs aren't simple. The Nexus 5 has a 4.95-inch 1080p HD display that's viewable outdoors very well, has eye-popping colors indoors, and has a great balance of light and detail for viewing photos or videos. Now, the auto brightness setting is kind of poor, but overall the quality of the display is fantastic. Now, the buttons are a little higher than I would prefer for a phone at this size, and the speakers are downright disappointing. Any premium smartphone released in the past year probably has better speakers than the Nexus 5, which has harsh and often distorted output. Now, from a hardware perspective, the Nexus 5 is just trying to be as good as everybody else. The 2.2 GHz quad-core processor and 2 gigs of RAM combo gets the job done very efficiently, but unfortunately the battery life is barely passable because it's limited to 2300 milliamps a day. Now you'll get through your day without issue, but it'll definitely fall before you will if you had a Galaxy Note 3 or an LG G2. The Nexus 5 tries to make up for that with top-of-the-line software. Keep in mind, this is running Android 4.4 KitKat, and it's doing it weeks, if not months, before any other device will even sniff these features. This is why you buy a Nexus. Not for the hardware, but because the software truly is ahead of the curve. Now, the latest version of Android features a ton of under-the-hood changes for better audio, more video capabilities, some untested ways to accelerate performance, and new APIs for things like contactless payments in stores. Now, the more demonstrable changes include a new home screen that jumps right into Google Now, and it's even faster than before. It shows you shipping information, breaking news, weather reports, scores, and pretty much everything else you've come to expect from Google Now. From there, you can manage auto awesome animated GIFs, and yes, I pronounce it as GIF, or you can share your photos with other apps in Google Plus circles. I'd advise getting used to and loving this app because it's pretty obvious this will eventually replace the Gallery app. Now, the standard Gallery app that you've known and loved, which allows you to view photos according to date, locations, and other features, is currently present in Android 4.4, but it's pretty clear that it's on borrowed time because Google has really been hammering Google Plus, and I'm pretty sure this app will be your default gallery in the future. As for the quality of the photos taken with the Nexus 5, it's unsurprisingly not that impressive. No Nexus has taken great photos, and the Nexus 5 doesn't do anything to change that reputation. But on the bright side, it's a lot better than the Nexus 4, and it's upgraded to being at least on the level of good enough. Not the best out there, but definitely worth sharing photos most of the time. Thanks to optical image stabilization, the 8 megapixel camera can take some solid photos. The problem lies on the processing side, which is not as good as the phones you'll get from HTC, Samsung, Sony, or LG. It's more than just having an 8 megapixel camera. You've got to have the right amount of software to capture an image and capture it correctly, and the Nexus 5 sadly lacks that software. A lot of times when you're outdoors, you will have to make manual adjustments because the exposure setting is set way too high. This can be good sometimes for low light settings, but it's really bad outdoors, so you're going to have to tweak and tune to get the right image. And side note, I'd recommend turning on HDR Plus because this can really help turn a bad situation into a good or decent situation most of the time. To wrap things up, the Nexus 5 is clearly a good phone, but it's trailing much of the phones that are supposed to look up to the Nexus, which was kind of the point of creating this line of product in the first place. The HTC One has better sound. The Samsung Galaxy S4 has more software options. The Moto X has better voice commands, and the LG G2 has better battery life. But you know what the Nexus 5 has that none of those devices have? An unmatched price. An unbelievable price if you think about it. An unlocked 16GB Nexus 5 can be purchased for $349, half of what most premium Android phones cost right now. Because of that advantage on affordability, some of the software sacrifices have to make sense. If you're buying a phone on contract, there are probably better options out there if you're going to use the camera a lot. But if you want a smartphone at full price, or you want a phone without the crap installed by any of the other Android manufacturers, and you don't want to have to wait on updates most of the time, well, it's pretty obvious.